Now is the time, a time you'll look back on, a time you adopt as inspiration. You will recollect this time, this moment, right now. Motivate yourself towards success. Overcome, take over. The time is now.
And it is back. Welcome everyone to Loaded Mag NUFC for another Sunday special, but an evening Sunday special. And I tell you what, we've just been talking on sort of before we went live, and I've literally got the fan next to me. I'm absolutely dripping. The heat is out in the UK. There's no doubt about it, and it's just absolutely mad. Loving every second of it. Barbecues, sun's out, the paddling pool's out for the kids. It is the perfect Sunday, but only because Loaded Mag are back for another absolutely special. But boys, how are you?
All good, Pete. All good. You could have predicted who was going to turn up and who was not going to turn up. Any bit of heat and too hot to get out of the kitchen for some of the boys.
Yeah, I didn't even know beforehand, but I kind of planned without them, so I wasn't surprised. I've got to be honest, but yeah, look, yourself, Daz, Richie, we're in the house. Richie, 25 degrees up in Newcastle.
Yeah, 25 up here. Yeah, not a cloud in the sky either.
I know. I tell you what, all the media that say that nobody comes up to Newcastle because it rains all the time, they don't know nothing. They know nothing about Newcastle. I bet Sven Botman's loving life. I bet he's thinking, it's like this every day.
I know it's probably raining. It's probably raining in Austria, so he would be.
yeah, that's true. That's true. Right, yeah. But he certainly had a good welcome with the weather in Tyneside, that's for sure. But look, it is a Newcastle special. We have the transfer shows. We talk about everything related to Newcastle United, whether it's reviews and all the rest of it from the matches. But we like to have something a little bit different now and again. And we've got a really, really special guest on tonight to talk all things sort of South American football, MLS, and in particular, Miguel Almirón. And, we're really kind of proud and delighted to have Roberto Rojas to join us in the studio tonight. So by all means, Daz, let's get him involved straight away.
Welcome, Roberto.
Hey guys, Roberto? I'm good, guys. How are you? It's quite the introduction, and yeah, I haven't done a lot of these shows, always talking to people that are closely connected to Newcastle, but yeah, I'm excited to come on and talk about a little bit of Miggy and of course everything going on with the South American game and the connection with Newcastle.
Definitely, but just obviously before we get on to the football side of things, just talk a little bit about yourself, really, for the Newcastle fans that are in the chat and watching live. Just tell us a little bit about yourself, some of the work that you've done over the years, and sort of your background, really.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, as you know, the connection that I have with Miguel Almirón comes from being Paraguayan. That's where my family's from. I was born and raised here in the States. And obviously growing up in that environment, you're always a fan of football. You always have a team that you have to support. And like a lot of kids that come from similar backgrounds, not even just from Paraguay, but also from South America, wherever. My background, it was no different. Obviously, I grew up liking the sport. I wasn't good enough to be a professional, unfortunately, like a lot of my friends were trying to do as well. So I thought, why not go for the next best thing and be involved in the football media. So that was something that I've done over the last, I'd say, now it's been 7 years now since I've been doing this, but just working my way up into the football media, trying to make connections, obviously make connections from all over the world. Doesn't matter if it's here in the States or in South America or Europe or wherever. And that's basically where I made my name. Obviously, you know, the connection with Newcastle was something that I had this relationship now for almost like 3 years now, over 3 years, where basically I was essentially following this transfer that had occurred with Miguel Almirón leaving Atlanta United to go to Newcastle, and just following it ever since. But of course, you know, it's not just him that I'm following. Follow the other Paraguayan footballers that have been across the entire world playing in different leagues, not just here in MLS or in the Premier League, but also in South America, always the brightest gems that are coming. And yeah, and ever since then, I've been working at places like beIN Sports. I just recently finished the season at NBC Sports working for the Premier League team. And so, yeah, it's been quite a crazy journey, I would say, in like my whole path and everything that I've been able to do so far. It feels like I'm still so young. I'm 24 at the moment, but I feel like I've experienced so much in the last 7 years that I wouldn't have even imagined it if I was like still a teenager playing football, soccer, as we say here in the States, with my friends.
I tell you what, you don't half make me feel old, Roberto.
Sorry about that.
Oh man, it feels like an age ago that I could say that I was 24 years old. But like, look, I have to be honest. Obviously followed you for quite a while now on social media. Obviously with all the links in the build up to Miguel Almirón signing for Newcastle and beyond. And you've definitely been on quite a journey, and you know, it's been really interesting to watch that journey for yourself in the background for sure. But look, I'm sure we're gonna get into some questions in a second and maybe look back on Miggy's career in a little bit more detail and other players based in South America. And I think there'll be a few in the chat that might want to ask you about certain South American players and what your thoughts are on with them.
They're coming through already.
Definitely, there's already some questions started, and we will come to the questions that those are put in the chat already. It's great to see some of the regulars in there. Paul Ox is in there, Jordy, Mick, Andrew, Ian Two Trader. It's fantastic to see you guys, and there's so many others that already joined us already. Massive thanks to Jordy. Mick already put a donation in, and obviously said welcome to Loaded Roberto. So massive thanks to you, Ray as well. Thank you for your super sticker. Like I say, all of this helps the channel grow and build. If you haven't clicked the thumbs up button, the like, please do that. It makes a massive difference for us as a channel. But look, you know, we wanted to have a little bit of a focus on obviously different players of Newcastle, and Miggy has sort of, you know, there's been a lot of talk about Miggy coming towards the end of this season about his sort of future and whether it was going to be at Newcastle. But before we get to that, you know, Miguel Almirón's had an interesting kind of rise in his career, very different to lots of other maybe South American based players. You know, he started his career quite early on, and I think if I'm right, and I apologize if I don't pronounce this correctly, you might want to correct me, but Cerro Porteño, is that right?
Cerro Porteño. It's
Okay.
close enough.
Yeah,
I've seen worse. I've seen worse pronunciations for more bigger names. So I'll take this one. For now.
That's absolutely fine. No, I try my best. But yeah, he started out his career there, and he was obviously playing there for a little bit while. He looks a very young Miguel Almirón in some of these pictures, that is for sure. But just you know, talk to us a little bit about how he sort of maybe started from Cerro Porteño and moved to Llanos. How was that kind of transition at that point of his career?
Yeah, it's very interesting to think about this. Like a little over 10 years ago, I think that's when he started to kind of break through into the youth sides. And not a lot of people, ironically enough, thought that he would make it to the Premier League, let alone be a Paraguay international and have all these type of fame and whatnot. I mean, many people thought that this was going to be maybe a player that was probably, and you look at him, like when he was younger, he was way skinny than he is now. And people still give them that kind of heat. But still, like, there were a lot of players that were highly rated above him in Paraguay, especially in Cerro Porteño, where he wasn't a main star. It wasn't the case of a player who, you know, he always becomes the main star on a South American side, then moves their way up to another team and then, you know, does there. No, this was quite different for him. He was a part of the U20 side of the Paraguay that made it to the World Cup, the U20 World Cup, and he was still a part of the supporting cast. He had the occasional starts there and there, but as typical it is for a lot of these Paraguayan players who don't really make the jump from Paraguay to Europe, they tend to go to neighboring countries because I think that's where they can be able to develop themselves even further. Like, so they go to countries like Mexico, like Brazil, or in Miggy's case, go to Argentina, where obviously that's where the biggest Paraguayan community is actually over there. So it was just that kind of case. And he went very young still. He went at like 21 years old, and he went to a modest side, Lanús, what are not really a big powerhouse in comparison to your Bocas, your Rivers, your San Lorenzo's, Racing, Independientes, and so on and so forth. So he goes to a Lanús side that is quite modest per se. And I think that was the case of him where he was able to develop himself. And maybe, just maybe, that if he has that kind of breakout year or something, that another team would pick him up. In the last year of his season there at Lanús, they actually ended up winning the league, the domestic league, which for a team like Lanús, which is a very small team in comparison to like the other ones, it's a big achievement. And they did that, and Miggy was one of the star players that did so well in that league. He scored in the final against San Lorenzo in a 4-0 win at the Estadio Monumental, which is basically the national stadium of Argentina, where a lot of names have played there. And so that's kind of where he made his name. And then heading into 2016, of course, towards the end, there was interest coming from other leagues. We saw the interest. I think at one point, teams from Serie A were interested. I didn't hear anything about the Premier League. But from that time, there was this interest coming from a little team that I'm sure all three of you guys are familiar of, with Atlanta United. Now, at the time, and Miggy was 22, 23, and there was still that kind of stereotype, maybe it is even now to this day, where they think, why is someone like him that is so young, that is obviously very talented, going to go to MLS and so-called ruin his career? Now, obviously, we knew that was not the case, because he ended up going and he was reunited with his former manager, a former manager that managed the Paraguay national team, Gerardo Martino, now the coach of Mexico, and obviously has a big connection in Paraguay, coaching the national team to the quarterfinals at the World Cup in 2010. So obviously there is that connection of saying this is someone that is very much respected from Paraguayans all over. And, you know, he took a risk. He took a risk of going to the league, and he showcased himself. And that's where we saw his best form. That's where all the eyes of the world were on him, and the attention was given to him. And, you know, he broke out there in quite a young team. The fact that they went into their second year in existence and won MLS Cup, and he was one of the standout players alongside of Joseph Martinez and so on and so forth. But that was the start of saying, okay, this is a not world class, but like this is a talented player that can indeed do something and then prove themselves into Europe. Because, you know, heading into the Newcastle movement, we'll talk about that, of course, later on, but you know, this was a risk for a lot of these sites. Not like now where you see all the young talents from MLS that are going to Europe, that are going to all these teams. Like for someone like him, this was uncharted territory. He was one of the pioneers of him going from MLS, a player that was going into MLS still in the developing stages of his career, and then going straight to Europe. So overall, that's how it all started for him before he made his move to Tyneside.
Interesting. And, you know, you've touched on a little bit with Atlanta United, and it was obviously he made the move there, and he seemed to really sort of like hit the ground running there. He made a really good connection with Martinez, and they had a really good connection there. And some of the football that he was playing was a really, really top level. One of the things that's really interesting, actually, that a lot of people don't see now from a Newcastle perspective, that he was actually a really good free kick taker. He used to score quite a few free kicks there at Atlanta United, and we don't see that from a Newcastle perspective now. But he was really kind of, you know, one of the key players there, and you know, particularly in his last season at Atlanta United when he won the MLS Cup in 2018. I think it was 13 goals, 11 assists in that season. Fantastic numbers from Miggy, and played a key part in that. But in terms of Miggy, there, I've said in my opinions, he was one of the main players and the main man in the team. Is that how it was perceived in America, in the States, with the Atlanta United fans?
If he wasn't the main guy, he was definitely one of them. Now, obviously, Joseph Martinez came into that season. You talk about the 13 goals. Joseph Martinez went and scored 30. So, yeah, obviously, the attention is obviously given to those that scored goals, and rightly so. But I think Miggy was kind of the brainchild of that team. The fact that everything that was moving forward, and, like you said, that combination with Joseph Martinez was particularly because of Miggy's influence. You saw someone that was obviously working well right behind him in the 10 role, or even working on the wings like we've always seen him sometimes at Newcastle. So that was kind of the perception of him. And we always knew that he had the talent, and rightly so at the young age that he was when he left. He was 23 at the time. So obviously, I think it was the case of him saying, okay, how much longer are we going to have him on this team? Because I think eventually Atlanta United knew that they could make a profit from him, and winning all these awards. He won the MLS Cup, but he was also in the best 11. He was an all-star, player of the month. I think he was also Paraguayan Footballer of the Year. So he had all of these awards given to him because of that influence and because of that impact that he had at Atlanta United. And I think it was only natural for him to make that jump to the Premier League and to Newcastle.
Definitely. And look, the one thing that a lot of fans forget is actually we were linked with Miguel Almirón quite early in that season. I think I remember first seeing the links with Miguel Almirón around October time. The season, and that's quite early in the season to have those real strong links. In actual fact, the only one I can really kind of mirror that to in comparison is actually Kieran Trippier. I think with the takeover happening, Kieran Trippier was our first link quite early on, in October last year in 2021, and I did see that very similar to Miguel Almirón. We were linked quite heavily with him, and was it clear for Atlanta United that it was going to be his last season there? Was it quite clear early on that he was always planning to move on at some point?
Yeah, and I think you have to give the benefit of the doubt to the player. Like, eventually, this isn't the case of a player, like, when they break out, and this goes to any league, like, even if it's in MLS or North America or South America, like, eventually, like, you're not going to stop someone from going to one of the top leagues and, of course, make a profit from it. So, yeah, I think it was always the case. I think the one doubt that we had, and here from a Paraguayan perspective, and even from an Atlanta United perspective as well, was why Newcastle? Now, obviously, it bowed out well eventually, but at the time, many people thought, oh, why is he going to a side that is at the time fighting relegation or always, bouncing around the bottom half of the table? It kind of felt as if, though, like, why would he go there and risk his prime years per se at a team like that? So, but I think obviously, not a lot of Paraguayans have played in the Premier League. I think, obviously I had a few more after Miggy, but at the time, I think it was like maybe the 7th or 8th ever. And this is spanning over almost 30 years of existence in the Premier League. So, for him to get that opportunity and to get him into a situation where he could be the not star player, but he could be a top player and get consistent playing time under Rafa Benitez at the time, I think it kind of felt like, okay, I'm going to the Premier League, and not even just because I'm going to be playing in one of the top leagues in the world, playing against the best players in the world, but you have to look at it from a financial perspective as well. I mean, he was at the time the most expensive signing that Newcastle had gotten for them, under Mike Ashley. So this was kind of where all the expectation was given to him. I didn't think of him as being the savior because I felt like it was just too much for him, but you kind of saw what he was like. He was energetic, the smile. I mean, come on, how can you not like that smile? So I think it was kind of that like perception of thinking like he was the one that was going to solve all the issues that was going on for Newcastle and that it was going to be fixed like that. Obviously, time told that it wasn't the case, but at the time you thought, this is someone where they can actually do something. And the fact that it took like, I don't know, like over 10 years for that transfer record to be broken. I think Owen had that record for quite some time, and then Miggy comes and breaks it in like 12 years. So of course the expectation was big, and even for him as well. I mean, this was a guy, and this is going back to his early life. This is a guy that wasn't exactly in the best conditions. He wasn't poor per se, but from a Paraguayan perspective, if you're going there and you're going to make the amount of money that you're going to make, why not take it? Why not allow yourself to be financially secure, to help your family? Doesn't matter what team you play in the Premier League. It's the experience that matters. And I think for him, and then speaking to people that are close to him, it's like it's a dream come true to play in the Premier League. Obviously, it was, I guess, destiny that Newcastle became the home for him. But I think ultimately, I think it was just how it all panned out, and saying, for Atlanta's perspective, that this was going to be someone that we're going to have to get rid of, but we wanted to get him at a reasonable price and for him to go and succeed in the Premier League.
Yeah, and Mike Ashley was a difficult negotiator. He always proved to be the case, and that move did drag on. It looked like it was going to get done at the beginning of January. It dragged on right till the end of the January, and actually it coincided with us beating Man City at home on the Wednesday night game, which was a fantastic result. And then with Miggy being confirmed that same evening, it really did make for a joyous occasion at St. James's Park, and the fans really got behind the players.
I guess, Pete, with Mike Ashley, he probably saw Miggy as someone that he could bring in, stay with us for a year or two, and then his value would increase, sell on, make a profit. That, like he did with Kabaya or whoever else. But that was partly in his thinking, because we didn't sign too many players at that stage.
Look, I don't know what you guys think, Richie, Daz. It was a bit of a shock when Miggy, when it was actually finalised so late in the window, because of the points that you made, Daz, is that actually we don't sign many players anyway, but then to sign a player like Miguel Almirón for the money that we did, was it a look? Obviously, look, we're going back a few years now. We're going back to 2019. I don't even think we even knew each other at that point. But like from your perspective, Richie, like were you genuinely surprised when that deal kind of came about?
Obviously, I knew the interest. I think the one thing about me is that typical Newcastle thing is, there'll be plenty of interest there, but we'll just never get it over the line, because that was the thing that happened every single transfer window, pretty much under Mike Ashley. But obviously, I think if we go back to the press at the time, there was, Rafa made it blatantly clear that he wanted this doing. And to be fair, when you look, you go back at it now, he broke the record to bring him, and look, and that's not necessarily a good thing for Miggy, or a good thing for you guys, but now we're actually looking to break this record all the time now, which is something which is new to all of us. But he was. I always, see some of like the Copa America highlights and stuff like that. He was always one of the better players in the Paraguay team. And I know Paul's obviously mentioned it in the chat already. I was going to mention it to Roberto as well. But did he ever, obviously when he was at that stage, like moving from Atlanta to Newcastle, did he ever get a bit of inside information from Diego Gavilan at the time? Because obviously he was big in the national team with Paraguay, and obviously I was wondering if he bounced things off him just to get a feel of what the club was like, the area, the country, and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously this was the case of, I think, someone that, went into, like I said, like uncharted waters, because of the fact that he was, like you said, this was really a player that, always, and, the fact that I'm very fortunate to speak close to the people that are with him in this camp, that he was always been this kind of like sensible guy, always been a family man. You don't hear him too much on the news of him going out. He's always been that kind of person. I've said this for years, doing like all these podcasts and shows related to him. He's always been that, and he's maintained it to this day. I mean, obviously now he's a kid and whatnot, so can't go out as much anyway, but still, I think that was kind of the attitude that, I guess, allowed him to stay in England for quite some time, because, prior to him, we've had players like Roque Santa Cruz who played at Blackburn and Man City, and other players that came about to England, but they didn't stay as long. I think the case for Miggy was that because he was someone that had that kind of, I guess, mental strength in that sense, and playing over 100 games, which is pretty impressive for Paraguayan to do that in the Premier League. So yeah, I think it was just always like in him saying that he always wanted to do better, that he always wanted to be a good player. And, I think bearing the responsibility over the last 4 years now of being the best player that Paraguay has at the moment, because he plays in said league and obviously plays against the best players in the world, I think the fact that he was able to kind of really shoulder this pressure. And, we could talk about like his performances and whatnot on a different time, but still, I think just from that and the fact that he's been so, I guess, reliant to always stay there and wanting to embrace himself with the city, the fact that, he's been there for quite some time and, he's brought a kid to the world from there. It's just like, it really understands that he has that connection to the city of Newcastle and to the team as well.
I just reminiscing now back to the time when Miggy signed, because I remember seeing the picture of him getting off the plane, and it's real. And I know at that time, all I was thinking is, okay, Rafa's got his man. That means Rafa's going to stay, because every day was Rafa fighting with Mike Ashley or fighting with in the press, giving across. It was us and Rafa against everyone else, really. And I just like, Rafa's got his man. Okay, he's going to stay. But it didn't turn out that way.
No. And actually, you mentioning that, Daz, brings me on to kind of the next point. So, he moves from Lanús to Atlanta United, I think for around 6.5 million. He then moves from Atlanta United to Newcastle for, I think the whole deal was 21 million, but I think it was initial 16 million deal brokered there. So he moves to Newcastle January 2019. And Daz has just mentioned about Rafa Benitez and obviously the talk about him potentially staying in the club. In your, from you following that move, in your own opinion, do you think Rafa Benitez was a huge influence on Miguel Almirón signing for the club?
Absolutely. I think, if it wasn't for Rafa Benitez, and I think obviously the influence that he has, I think Miggy would have never gone to Newcastle, similar to what Martino did when he brought him to Atlanta. I think there's always that kind of influence, and rightly so, with the reputation that Rafa Benitez has. Why wouldn't you want to not go? Obviously, in this case, in this particular situation that he's in, he has every right to feel as if a manager of his caliber is bringing me to the Premier League, I definitely want to go. And so, it panned out really good for him to go into that situation under Rafa Benitez. And I think that's where I think a lot of people were kind of feeling a bit more optimistic because, even though they saw Newcastle's not a side that was really a contender, they did see someone that had the respect of Newcastle fans, that obviously has the reputation and whatnot. So it kind of felt like, okay, maybe this can be something where, and maybe credit to what you guys said about like where Mike Ashley comes in and saying, okay, maybe this is someone that we can make a profit of in 1-2 years time. So it was such a big influence from him. And I think it's unfortunate that we didn't see most of Miggy under Rafa Benitez, because, I don't know what he would have been like under Rafa's system if he had played under like the whole preseason and then an entire season to himself. But I guess fate had a different option.
Definitely. In that, if I'm right in thinking, did you come over for the Southampton game?
I did. I went for that Easter weekend. It was one of the best experiences I've had in my life, honestly.
Yeah, I did track that obviously on social media because you were there for that game, and it was a fantastic performance. I think Perez scored a hat trick that day. To help win the game. Miggy was on fire. In actual fact, he got injured that game, which ended this season. He had a real big hamstring injury, which was caused by the fact that Southampton were kicking lumps out of him because they couldn't handle him that day at St. James's Park. He was playing at an electric level. He really was, and it almost kind of halted his start, in my opinion, to his start at Newcastle, because he was really picking up steam at that point. Rondon, Perez, and Almiron as the front three were causing all sorts of problems in that Rafa Benitez team. But you've touched on Rafa Benitez, and obviously Daz touched on Rafa Benitez as well. We then get to the summer of 2019 and all things change. One thing we thought we were going to get a takeover early June and everyone gets excited. That doesn't happen. At the end of June, Rafa Benitez turns around and says that he's leaving. He leaves. And then right at this sort of end of July, a couple of weeks before the season starts, Steve Bruce enters the helm, and you know, all things go downhill from that point of view.
Everybody.
Yeah, for everybody, not just the players, but all the fans as well. Everybody loses out over that 2-3 year period. And you know, it hasn't been. Let's be honest, it hasn't been the best period for Miguel Almirón. It hasn't been the 2 or 3 years that's been expected. You know, what do you think from your perspective over those over the Steve Bruce years has been the key sort of aspect of why maybe he hasn't performed at the level that we maybe have expected him to from what we saw early on?
Yeah, and you know, this is obviously my personal opinion. Everyone can take anything that they want, but I just think that, you know, when you go into a team, and this goes for any player, like, you know, obviously they have a plan for you. And, you know, once that plan just happens to vanish, in this case, Benitez leaving, it's almost as if now, okay, you have to figure out what's best for you and what kind of system works best for you. And I'm sure Bruce had an idea of what would work best for him, but I think, unfortunately, and you know, I'm not going to put the blame mainly just on Bruce and mainly on Miggy.
Yeah.
I'd like to divide it. I mean, I could. Yeah, why not? Why not?
That's Will. Yeah,
We all will.
Yeah.
Everyone in the chat will.
Okay. No, but I think eventually, you know, the player does has to step up and, you know, has to obviously work in whatever system that they come to. And this happens to all the players, not just him. But yeah, I think it was just a case of like you didn't see a consistent Miggy playing in a certain position. And he played everywhere, in every position I could recall. He played, like, at least in the attacking player, left wing, right wing, center forward, center attacking midfielder, center mid. I think he also played wing back at one point as well. It's just like, and I'm surprised he hasn't done goalkeeper in this case. But I think that was just kind of the fear of where we didn't see the best Miggy. You know, the fact that it took him so long to get his goal, and it's hard to believe that in that first season he was actually top goal scorer in all competition. I mean, yeah, 8 goals is 8 goals, but hey, that's something you got to take to you. But I think from a logical standpoint, I think unfortunately we didn't see the best of Miggy because we didn't see the best system that would work best for him. And the fact that he played in so many different positions, how are you going to succeed? You're not going to succeed playing 38 games or whatever in, you know, half of them in this position and half of them in another. It's like it doesn't work like that. And so I think that's where you kind of hinder that kind of development. And it's unfortunate that we didn't see the best of Miggy during the Bruce years. And, you know, I think maybe it kind of cost him what kind of player that everyone thought he would be when he first arrived.
First and foremost, I have to apologize to everyone in the chat for bringing Steve Bruce up. I do apologize. It is part of a process that we have to talk about him at some point. But yeah, we've managed to cover that part. I just want to know from your perspective, Roberto, and you know, you've been really honest, and I really appreciate your own viewpoints on this. But you know, for someone that's tracked Miguel Almirón's career and been a part of that sort of process, in following him from through South America into the MLS, into England, to see him playing as a centre midfielder. I remember the game against Wolves where he, both Ryan Fraser, who isn't a centre midfielder, and Miguel Almirón, who also isn't a centre midfielder, playing as 2 centre midfielders in that game. Like, what was going through your head when you were seeing Miggy playing in these positions? Like, you know, knowing where his best position is and knowing where you could get the best out of him. What was honestly going through your mind at that point?
So I spoke to, I'm kind of close to one of the former coaches of him, a youth coach, and he was telling me like where his best position is. And then we always said, you know, obviously on the wing or playing at the 10. And when he saw that, he couldn't believe his eyes. He was absolutely laughing his ass off, like literally when he saw that. So I felt the same way too. I'm like, what are you doing? Why is he playing? I've never seen him play in that position from a youth level for Paraguay, for Cedro, for Atlanta, for Lanús, and now he is playing here for Newcastle. I'm like, what the hell's going on? Like, and rightly so. It's like, okay, where are you going to put him? Like, you want someone that can definitely control the tempo and definitely work well in transitions, but don't have him track all the way back, because that way he's just wasting his energy. And you saw that. I mean, the guy, and credit to him, he has bags of pace, and you always see his stamina be very much up there. So credit for him to have that kind of like energy even after having to track back and go forward for 90 minutes. But you don't want to waste all of that kind of talent playing in that position. So yeah, it was just weird to see that, honestly. And it's definitely not a position that I definitely want to see him ever play again.
Yeah, he got bruised. That's the term for it.
Yeah, it originally created with Pardew, players that lost their way were Pardew. Miggy Almiron definitely got bruised playing centre midfield for Newcastle under Steve Bruce. That is for sure. But look, before we get to happier times, I do want to say, 275 watching live on a Sunday afternoon when it's blazing hot, 280 now. It's fantastic. So massive thanks to everyone tuning in. Click that thumbs up, that like button. And if you haven't subscribed yet to the channel, subscribe. We're forever growing and it's great to see. Lots of questions coming in the chat. Please, we will come to those questions. Do not worry. I'm getting some questions on Twitter as well, which I will come to throughout the show for Roberto to answer. It's been a great show so far, and great to hear your thoughts, Roberto, on Miguel Almirón throughout his career so far. But yeah, look, Richie, Daz, before we move on to more happier times, have you got any questions that you would maybe like to ask Roberto at this point?
I think one of the things that we forget about Miggy. You got to remember how good he looked when he played the three amigos, when it was him, Rondon, and Perez. When Rafa was there, how he showed what he was really capable of. As we mentioned, obviously he got bruised and stuff like that. Like, now, I know we've had this conversation numerous times on the channel, but I've always believed he's been a number 10. From what I've seen, he's his best position for Paraguay when he was at Atlanta as well. That's always been his best position. But I've always felt, and I know Pete's the same feeling, as he's never been played in his right position. Has he ever spoken when he's had private words with himself about, is he just wanting to put the shirt on and go out and deliver wherever he plays, or has he ever said, he really wants to be in that position, and then, he possibly is looked to move away from the club to play in that position where he feels he's strongest?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting to really think about that, because you would think that in his position, if this was any other footballer, like obviously the one person that comes to mind is Romelu Lukaku, when he had that whole issue of saying, oh, the system doesn't work best for me. And, that created such a huge mess per se. And then obviously led to him leaving Chelsea and going on loan to Inter. So for the case for Miggy, I think what I respect about him, and I think a lot of people should as well, is, the fact that he always kind of felt like, again, this is someone that doesn't really speak to the press as much, is really much low-key in his life and whatnot. So, the fact that he really didn't speak out about it maybe proves that he was wanting to make it work in the position that he was playing in and wherever he was given. I think, I think if this was maybe someone else, maybe they would have gone to the media and say, because it happens sometimes, like people go to the media and say, yeah, I don't like how this coach is playing me, or I don't like how the team's going on. It happens. But I think because of his image and him trying to take care of that and the responsibility that he has, obviously being the main star for Paraguay, I think he understood that, while maybe deep inside he's thinking, oh my God, why am I playing in this position where I'm clearly not going to demonstrate all my talents? At least there, it's like, okay, you see him trying to perform as best as he can in any position that he plays in. But even deep down, you're thinking, at least for anyone really, maybe they would think like, okay, why am I playing in this position? But I think just because of the situation that he's in, how he got there, the competitiveness of like everyone else wanting to be in his shoes, basically, I think that was kind of one of those things where like you have to suck it up as well. So I think that's why my respect, where I think maybe he could have shown a bit more fire in him saying something like this and maybe speaking out. But the fact that he didn't just shows that, okay, maybe he was just trying to make it work in wherever position that he was in.
I was going to say, we did a show at the end of the season called Squad Game, and we basically went through who we thought was going to be part of the project going forward, who was going to be moved on. I was one of the people, especially with the way his second half of the season's form was, the way I thought he would be kept on as part of the project, definitely in the short term, but given a chance to prove what he's capable of. And I think if you go back to the Crystal Palace game, that goal he scored, which won goal of the month, it was a fantastic finish. You've got to look at how he got past the full Ty Mitchell, the full-back, got inside him. And I think probably the only place he could have actually put the ball to score was like the postage stamp top left-hand corner, really, wasn't it? So, I think it showed to Newcastle fans what he's actually capable of. And that's still in a position where he's not, he's still learning that position as well. Do you know what I mean? He's either been stuck on the left, now he's been moved over to the right. And it seems to be, because there isn't we haven't got that much depth on that side. Obviously, I know there's been a lot of rumours in the transfer window about Diaby coming in or Hudson-Odoi or whoever. But I'd like to think that Miggy will get a chance to put his stamp on it and possibly say, look, I want to be considered for this. And we saw yesterday, yes, it was a behind closed doors friendly against Gateshead and the opposition wasn't great, but he still scored 2 goals coming in off that right-hand side again.
Yeah, I think so too. I think, I mean, again, there is a player there. I'm not saying that this is, again, when you played over 100 games in the Premier League, and, you can divide opinion all you want, but it's clear that in any system and any manager, and, I think the good thing about him is that, in every manager that played for him always praised him. He always, be it Rafa or Bruce or even Eddie Howe now, he's always been highly respected. And I think that's kind of why he's kind of stayed there for so long. Now, obviously, as Newcastle go into this new era of being a team that wants to go for more, of course, he's going to have to step it up, and rightly so, in comparison to his former years over there. So I think there is still a player there. I think, he's not exactly yet in the late stage of his career. He's only 28, so he's still right there that he can still flourish, and you have players that are much more older than him doing very well. So I mean, I think there is still a spot for him in this Newcastle side. I think the question now will be, and this is obviously up to Eddie Howe and obviously the direction that the board wants to go through, is where do we want him? Do we want him to be a main player where he's consistently starting every so often? Is he a player that we're just going to have him on the bench, or him coming out, or keep him for depth as well? I mean, this obviously all depends on the transfer window and what Eddie Howe wants to do. But I think ultimately, because of that second half of the season where it turned around for everyone, not just Miggy, of course, but I think it kind of proved for maybe some people in the club or even the fans as well, is okay, if it can work out and an entire preseason and an entire full season under Eddie Howe can work well, then we can finally see the player that everyone was really hoping for when he first joined back in 2019.
I think the last bit I was going to say to follow before obviously Daz gets in and we ask the questions in the chat. Pete touched on it briefly about we used to see him take, quite a lot of free kicks when he was for Paraguay and Atlanta. And he's a really good dead ball specialist in and around the box. Do you think is it down to a confidence level because of the level he's playing at now at Newcastle, or do you think it's more because he's not a regular starter on a week-to-week basis that perhaps that makes him fall down the pecking order in the set piece taker routines?
I mean, again, these are answers that I think Eddie Howe has to ask, and he's the one that is obviously close to them, but. Yeah, I mean, you do see it, and you have players like Trippier who obviously is good at free kicks as well. So I think it's just a case of where does he stand in the pecking order? And I mean, I think he can take free kicks. I'm not saying he's the best at it, but he can definitely do it. But I think just because of all the other players on that team that are much more better from set pieces and whatnot, I think that's where it's okay, he can't really do much about that, and he can improve and see what he can do, but ultimately. I think because he wasn't as consistent that he usually was, at least this season, I think that's where, he kind of fell out of the pecking order. And unfortunately, people didn't see him as that dead ball specialist, and where you could put him on set pieces and whatnot for him to be dangerous on.
Yeah, just linking back into what you talked about, Richie, the squad game. So we did that about 5 or 6 games to go, and I was at that time I said, yeah, Miggy has to go in the summer. It hasn't worked out for himself as well as Bert to move on, and then that kind of threw down the challenge to him. He picked it up and he performed really well. And then we got to the summer, and I said, yeah, I'd be happy for Miggy to stay. And then he started playing really well for Paraguay as well. I think he scored 2 goals in one game. He scored 2 goals in the preseason game the other day against Gateshead as well. But and now I'm thinking we should hang on to him. And I know some people have said it in the chat as well with the extra spaces on the bench and subs off the bench, and for just as part of the squad. Since Ian is in a rich vein of form, it might be no harm to hang on to him. But if an offer did come in and it meant that it would suit Miggy and us we got a decent offer in, then so be it. It might be the way to go. But I know he does split opinion, especially in the chat. I know I see Ian in the chat is dead against him, and in relation to the stats that when you compare to other players. But it is only coming to clicking for him now, and we can point to Joe Linton and the renaissance of Joe Linton as well. So maybe Eddie Howe can get that something else extra out of him, and that's what we're hoping for. Shall we get to some of the questions, Pete?
Definitely. There's a lot of questions in there, and not just about Miggy. I think there's some questions on a number of different players as well. But yeah, Roberto, if you're happy for some questions to be fired your way, then yeah, let's go for it now.
Go for it.
Okay, so we'll go to Leon, who became a member there, or rejoined as a member with us earlier on tonight. So what is the difference in the way Miggy is used for the national team versus Newcastle? And I guess this links back to the positional talk that we talked about.
Yeah. I think it's kind of like in a similar situation. I mean, Paraguay unfortunately didn't make the World Cup in Qatar, and they obviously missed out as well on Russia a couple years ago as well. But you did see a Miggy that I think is obviously playing in a side that's much more attacking. Obviously has gone through various managers as well, and I think that's always been kind of the issue as well. As much as Newcastle fans are really having the issue of like where his best position is, I think in Paraguay there's a similar case, and this is obviously due to, I guess, the consistency or I should say inconsistency that Paraguay have been playing. So I think obviously the main thing is obviously the attacking prowess, that you have someone that obviously has more of the ball, is obviously looking to play to the forwards and obviously trying to create attacks. So I think that's what my main big difference I would say is that, you know, this is a player that obviously can work out well and is more consistent, you would say, playing in an attacking role. You don't see him playing at wing back. You don't see him playing in the center mid. You see him playing mainly as an attacking player. And I think that's where some of the big differences are for him playing for Paraguay and then for him playing for Newcastle.
Cool. There was one more Miggy question here I had here. Yeah, and then we get off the topic of Miggy for a while. The questions anyway. So, and it was Miggy ever close to leaving in the Bruce era? Did you hear anything?
Good question.
From what I was told, I mean, I think there were obviously rumors coming from different teams. I think there was always that interest, but I think it was never the case of it being concrete. I think deep in my estimate, I think Miggy wanted to go in and try to tackle the issues or the problems that was going on with the side. But from what I was told, and obviously from speaking to people close to him, I think there was very big interest from other teams across Europe, even in the Premier League as well. There still is, of course. I think there still is. I could say that obviously on the record, but you know, I think during that time, I think it was still the case of him being happy where he was at and him trying to improve. As bad as the situation was under Steve Bruce, that he could have obviously go and try to perform as best as he can, even when the circumstances weren't as good.
Cool. Let's switch topic in a bit and let's talk about Diego Galvan gets mentioned a bit, being a fellow Paraguayan. Do you know much about him and his career? I guess that's one or two questions.
Yeah. Well, it's actually good that you mentioned him because on a podcast that I do called Guarani Vision, which is the first ever podcast dedicated to Paraguayan football in English, we spoke to him. We spoke about his time, and he was telling him about and he was talking about his time under playing with Sir Bobby and how after his first game, I think it was against Manchester United or something, where he got in from a tackle from Japstan, and right after the game, Sir Bobby comes to him in the dressing room and saying, "Welcome to England," basically, as like saying, "Oh, this is like everything you're gonna deal with." So no, he's a player that obviously was the pioneer, first ever Paraguayan to play in the Premier League. Obviously had a lot of time playing on the national team as well, part of that golden generation that went to 4 straight World Cups. He's I think history, at least from a Paraguayan perspective, I think because of all the players that have come after him, I think are starting to recognize how important he was, where he was someone coming in straight from Paraguay to the Premier League, which at the time was obviously uncharted territory, even for a player of his nationality to go to, but going straight from the domestic league to the Premier League. I think a lot of Paraguayans who maybe didn't see much of him or maybe just missed him because of a generational difference, I think are starting to now recognize of kind of him opening the door to other Paraguayans that came eventually. I think now he was the first, and now in total we've had last I checked, I think 12 Paraguayans to play in the Premier League.
Let's stick let's go stick with Paraguay for another little while before we go broader to South America. So Simon asks, is there any more decent young Paraguayans coming through the system that may make their way into Europe that you know about? Anyone standout players?
Well, I think the one that is already kind of the big standout is already in England. I'm obviously talking about Julio Enciso, the player that just signed for Brighton Hove Albion. He just signed about a little over a month ago. He was one of the brightest gems in Paraguay at the moment, kind of similar to what Miggy actually plays. I think he's a bit more smaller and he likes to score more goals, but he is someone that I see him and I see a little bit of Miggy. I even see a bit of Roque Santa Cruz. Okay, yeah, he's obviously a bit smaller than him, but he has that eye for goal and he has that pace and talent to obviously start in transition. So he's someone that, he's 18 years old. He hit double digits. I think he was, correct me if I'm wrong, probably was like the top goal scorer for 18-year-olds in all of South America before he made the jump to England. So he's the one that I think if I had to choose to look out for from Paraguay, it's him. So hopefully that you'll be able to get a chance to see him in a Brighton shirt this season.
Hopefully not against us. Yeah, let's talk about, and I know this is probably on one of your topics as well, Pete, about Gabigol. Because we're linked to him in January, and now we see the rumors are coming up again that were potential links to him. And I know we have Steve Nixon, I believe, has gone to Brazil as well, or to South America at least, to try and do something there. So there could be potential deals being lined up there. So Anthony, you know about Gabigol, as in linked to Newcastle.
Yeah, it's interesting to see that someone like him, who I've been very fortunate to have seen him early on when he was starting at Santos, and everyone dubbed him the new Neymar, when I just thought to myself, no, this is not even close to Neymar, because Neymar and Gabigol play different positions. Now, obviously, he ended up going to Europe and didn't have the time and didn't demonstrate it at Inter, didn't demonstrate it at Benfica. When everyone thought that he would be a flop and that maybe it would be not the best career for him, he goes back to Brazil, plays on a Flamengo side where they just completely wipe the floor in all of Brazil and South America. They go on to win the Copa Libertadores, the South American Champions League, and all the other domestic titles. And he's over there being the new idol. And for a team as big as Flamengo, who are very hard to please, having following them and seeing what kind of demands that they have, for him to be now one of their greatest ever players, I can say that now, obviously, because he's won all these titles there. And it doesn't take a lot to become a legend over there unless you win big titles. And I think when you score 2 goals in the final against the defending champions River Plate in stoppage time, coming back from 1-0 down, I think that's where you have to put yourself in folklore. But yeah, I think I think it would be nice to see him in the Premier League. I think it would be great because I think you see someone that obviously has a really good eye for goal. And I think from him to score all those goals in Brazil, which is a very physical league, you see, I don't know if you see a lot of the Brazilian games, but, maybe seeing it on YouTube or anything like that, it's a very, very strong and physical league. And I think, yes, it's a completely different animal compared to the Premier League, but I think for someone like him, I would like to see him in the Premier League. And of course, now, obviously, with the connection with the other Brazilians like Joelinton and Bruno Guimarães and all those guys, I think it would be nice to see that and be in an environment that would work best for him. And yeah, I mean, come to think of it, I think now with Newcastle having the money, because Flamengo are going to offer a lot for him. And, obviously these teams have the money that they need, but they can get some more cash from these top European sides, especially for a player that is obviously not a young talent and is kind of in the prime of his career. I think it would be very cool to see him there because I think there was always that talent I've joined him seeing him play because it almost seems like he's always got an eye for goal. You almost like every time I always see him, he always scores. So I'm like, okay, I would like to see him give it a shot in the Premier League and even at Newcastle and be the main striker for Eddie Howe.
Cool. Cheers, Roberto. Okay, maybe the last question, then we go back again. And this will stick Brazilian. So yeah, everyone wants us to talk about this as well. It's Lucas Porqueta. And have you any inside information on Lucas Porqueta? We've been linked to of course, obviously. Bruno's mate and has been over in Newcastle as well, over to see Bruno. And there's talk that he potentially handed in his transfer request. And of course, Newcastle have been linked with them all summer, and Arsenal are linked as well. Probably a few more clubs too. But have you heard anything about Lucas Porqueta?
Well, it's kind of interesting the fact that he's been in Newcastle for so long. You think, oh, it's destiny. Like he's gonna sign for them, and I kind of have that feeling. Like for some reason, I just think, obviously he's best mates with Guimarães and whatnot. So I think it kind of feels as if though it could indeed happen. And I'm curious to see how Newcastle are going to deal with all these kind of like rumors and how they're going to spend wisely. I think obviously with this whole money and whatnot, I was talking to a few friends. I'm like saying, they were saying, oh, how come Newcastle haven't done what City have done or what Chelsea have done and like splashed out all the big, names for a decent amount of money. And I was thinking to myself, no, because I think there's a plan there that they don't want to go into that. They understand that it's not that case. So I think they want to spend wisely and getting players that obviously are not superstars, but indeed can be superstars if everything works out well. I think that could be the case for Gabigol, could be the case for Porqueta as well. If he does go there, because I think you see a talent there. I think you see someone that can definitely make that midfield very much stronger. This is someone that starts for Brazil, probably will start for Brazil at the World Cup in Qatar. So if Newcastle are able to get someone like him, and he's for what, like 40 million or something like that, they have the money. I think it's the case of how well they're going to spend it. And I think because there is very much interest from other teams like Arsenal, like Tottenham, I think it's going to be that case of where what is going to convince him to join. Obviously, his mate Bruno is there. Maybe that's going to be a big factor. But no, I think he definitely would be someone that would, I personally think, could definitely go there. And like I said, he's been there so long in Newcastle. He's been hanging out with Bruno all this time. You think, what the hell? Just go and just join, and you can keep this for a much longer time.
He did go back when he came to Newcastle. He did go back to or else we've kidnapped him. That works too. Well, as long as we can play him, I don't mind.
I was going to say about Porqueta, because I think it's an interesting situation, because actually what's been quite interesting in the media is that we've been getting a little bit of praise recently because of the fact that, Roberto, you mentioned that we haven't just gone gung-ho and gone and signed everybody that's out there, all these big names, all for big money. And actually, we've been quite smart with our money. And I think a lot of the media have been surprised by that. We as fans haven't been surprised by that because the owners have told us that that's how we're going to be operating. And this is why it was quite interesting for me. And obviously, the news came out last night. Well, it came out over 24 hours ago. And if I'm honest, I think it was from quite an unreliable source that we'd actually put a bid in for Porqueta, and a lot of people were talking about that. Yeah, we put a bid in, it's going to be done. I looked at the source, and it wasn't really a credible source. But then it's come out today that he's handed in a transfer request from a credible source in L'Equipe, who are very credible in their knowledge. But again, it all seems to be more Arsenal led rather than Newcastle, and I kind of get the feeling that we're linked purely because of the Bruno Guimaraes link. And it's interesting because we have always said our priority is the right-hand side of midfield. And although Porqueta can play there and he can play in a variety of positions, I think we're going to be looking potentially as a specialist. And I'll be honest, we, as you said, Roberto, you're absolutely right. We can afford Porqueta. We've got to remember as well, AC Milan get 15% of that deal, which is why Lyon are going to want a significant amount from that deal, from Lucas Porqueta. And I just think to myself, although we can afford him, are we going to do that all in one summer? And it might sound pessimistic, but I just don't see us signing Lucas Porqueta this summer. And I can genuinely see him going to somewhere like an Arsenal or somewhere else. And we sacrifice him in order to get someone like Moussa Diarmé. I would love to get both. I would ideally love to get both, but I think we need a right winger to add balance to this team. I don't know what your thoughts on that from what you've seen of Newcastle.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think obviously that depth is going to be so important, and I think when you look at some of the things that Newcastle have to improve on, obviously you have to improve more on the right hand side, or possibly straighten up at more of the midfield and the defense as well. So clearly there is that those things that are important. Now, of course, you want to add, if you want to get someone like Porqueta, of course, but rightly so, you add that, then you add a talented player to your caliber. But you think to yourself, okay, what are we going to really splash our money on? Is it going to be something that we need to prioritize, where we have all this talent in the midfield, but we're not doing anything to help solve why our right flank's always getting beaten and we're not able to beat our man or anything like that, or to score from that side? So it's like you need to prioritize that. So like I said, I'm interested to see how Newcastle are going to do it. Like I said, I'm good that they're doing it wisely, and I think no, they're not going to do the big spending of, I don't know, like 200, 300, 400 million in one summer. I think they're going to gradually do it. And I think it's interesting now because obviously there's a World Cup happening at the end of the year. So clearly the interest will go into the January transfer window, where, God forbid, maybe someone breaks out at the World Cup that Newcastle need to work on, need to get, and they can get the money and they realize, hey, we have all this money in our surplus because we didn't spend so much in the summer. Now we can go and tackle that. So yeah, it's it'll be interesting. I'm really curious to see what Newcastle do this summer, and of course in the next transfer windows, and how they spend their money.
I'm going to disagree with Pete, because I was all set that Lucas Porqueta was joining us this summer, and then my hopes were dashed as the summer went on, and now they've risen again. So I'm the opposite of you, Pete. Even though when it comes to posters and reaction shows, I've both Diaby and Porqueta ready to go. Just say it, and we go.
I hope you look. I hope you're right, Daz. I really do. Maybe it's just me being a little bit pessimistic, but I really hope you're right, and we go out there and sign both. And I wanted to have mentioned in the chat that Sean Casey's talked about it today, and mentioned that we can sign everybody. We can sign Porqueta, Diarmé, all the list of transfer targets that we've talked about. Even Dominic Calvert-Lewin, which I'm still going to keep zipped about, but we can even sign him as well. We've got the money to do so, but I just don't know whether the club will operate in that way. But look, Roberto, are you okay? We've got a few more questions. Are you okay to stay on just to answer some questions?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, let's go for this one from Foxy, because Foxy's put a few questions in and I haven't really got them. So, which Paraguayan team do you support?
Oh, man. Well, obviously, I'm glad that you mentioned those two teams, because the team that I support, I wonder if I have I do. Actually, I'll be right back. And I'm going to show you the team that I support here. I don't know if I'm breaking podcast protocols or anything, but
not at all.
There are no rules.
The team I support is Cerro Porteño. Ironically, of course, Miggy's first team where he first started. And that's always been the team that I've supported. All my family, in Paraguay and people that come from Paraguayan family, you're typically born into it, basically, where if your parents support this team, then you're also going to support this team. I think there are the outliers, but I think my case, my first game, ironically, was the game that the Foxy has mentioned, Cerro Porteño Olimpia. That's the big derby over there. I was 8 years old. And from there on, I just became Cerro fan since then. So, yeah, that's the team that I support. I've been fortunate enough to see this team win a lot of titles domestically. Unfortunately, we don't have the luck from an international perspective. But hopefully one of these days, like I said, I'm not feeling old yet, but hopefully that I can come to a point where I can finally see Cerro win something from an international perspective, similar to what maybe fans who support Arsenal or Tottenham or even Newcastle as well can definitely go for that in the future.
Roberto, you're not old. You're 24 years old. You are not old. Trust me.
Hopefully, if I don't see any gray hairs, then maybe. But no, I don't know, man. I don't know.
You can have some of mine if you want.
We'll all share.
I'm glad you trained.
Good.
A different question, and it's another South American in Santiago Munez, who not from the film Goal, which hang on, I have here, but who joined us, and I know he's come on loan, and it was a year and a half loan, and of course this is all before the takeover, and he's been in our under 23s. Do you know much about him as such?
Yeah, I mean, you don't really hear much about him because I think that transfer just came out of the blue. I mean, he had some experience playing in Santo Laguna in Mexico, but yeah, I mean, I think this was someone that I don't know. I haven't seen much of him. I haven't heard anything like positive as well from like you just don't know. It's like similar to the Peruvian guy that they signed as well, Vinuca. So it's like I don't know. You don't see much about him, and maybe he's just a player that kind of is part of that depth from the academy side. And yeah, I mean, again, he's playing in a position that is very competitive as well. So it's very much difficult to see when he gets his opportunities.
Yeah, I think it was about kind of bedding in and getting used to the area and gradually easing them in. So hopefully this season now he can do something in the 23s and a bit more in the 23s and maybe progress in and get some first team games. So that's really it for the questions, Pete. I think
I've got a couple of questions that I'd like to put to Roberto. There's one player that we were linked with a little bit last week. A number of the national journalists linked us with another South American. It's a young lad, Angelo Gabriel, 17 years old at Santos currently. It was said that actually Steve Nixon was in Brazil actually negotiating to arrange a kind of a deal for him. Now, I am aware that he wouldn't be able to move this summer, and he would only be able to move next year, I think, once he turns 18. But what have you heard much about him? What tends to be the feel in South America of Angelo at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard the name roam around. One of us always like those young stars that are always breaking out and trying to prove to themselves. And Angelo was obviously someone that I've heard, coming from an esteemed academy like Santos. Santos are world renowned for their academy, and they've gotten the likes of, obviously going back to the likes of Pele, to Neymar, Robinho, Rodrigo plays at Real Madrid. So they have the talents out there, and I think Angelo is one of those new bright gems. I think, of course, the question is, and he's played, I think, 70 odd games. He is a goal scorer, but he hasn't been able to demonstrate it a lot for the first team. I think at youth level he does get those goals, but he's someone that I think can definitely have the consistency, but you don't see him being a main star on the Santos side. I think he has the talent, and he's 17, like I said, but I think, at this time, it kind of is that crucial age where these players need to go out and stand out and definitely be consistent players for their clubs. And you saw that with the likes of all the big Brazilian players that have come out. And obviously Santos is a side that I'm not really doing so well so far. They just got out of the Europa League equivalent of the South America, the Sudamericana. So I think this is a player that hopefully Newcastle can definitely keep their eyes on and see where he would fit. But I just think that maybe unless they're able to offer some amount of money that would be good enough for Santos' case, I think we're still going to probably see him in Brazil for maybe a season or two. But I think I'm not surprised that Newcastle are looking at players like him and kind of looking at youth, looking at hopefully getting them at a reasonable price, and hopefully, if indeed a plan that Newcastle want to go forward to is able to transition those type of youth players and do what like Brighton do, for example, of having all those young players from South America and then maybe going on loan somewhere and then going back into the first team. If that's something that Newcastle want to do, and I know they just got the former sporting director, so maybe that's kind of the plan that they want to do for the future.
It's interesting. Foxy is very vocal about his South American football, but Angelo Gabriel, baller, Santos, terrible team. That was kind of his kind of opinions on that. But look, one or two others have said about Angelo hasn't scored any goals in 30-odd appearances, but for the fact that he's playing men's football at 17 is no mean feat. And you can still have a good game and put tremendous performances in as a 17-year-old without scoring goals, and you can still influence the game in other ways. And it's clear from lots of people that watch South American football and watched Angelo in particular, they have said that they see something special in him. And look, we don't go for South American players very often. Certainly in recent years, we haven't signed many. So the fact that we're looking at a young player as talented as that, it fills me with a little bit of hope. I don't know about Richie and Daz. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, it's a market that you need to go in. I think if you look at Spanish teams in particular, like places like Benfica and in Portugal, so it's an area that they seem to get to very, very early. You look at Real Madrid over the last few years. There always seems to be some promising South Americans coming through. You look at Vinicius, how young he was when he signed at Real Madrid, and how long obviously they developed him. And he was back in Brazil. Okay, I think that's a similar sort of thing would happen if we went and got this Angelo. I think you'd probably see him bought, but I think you'd keep him playing over in South America to bring him on, develop him even further. I don't think you would see that the correct sort of development he would need if he was to come and play our under-23s. I think he needs to stay where he is now, get a bit more confident. Because I think if you look at any of the YouTube videos of Angelo Gabriel, he's got something, but he's that rough diamond. He's just, a bit more development, and then obviously polish him off and stuff like that. So, it's, for the price they're possibly talking, I think it's a fantastic shout. But I would definitely keep him over in South America and develop him further, because it's too, it's a 17-year-old coming to the other side of the world. It can be quite, daunting for people in the mid-20s coming across and, settling into a whole new league, a faster league, more physical league. You don't want to ruin that. Somewhere you want to build someone's confidence up, and that's the correct way to do it. Just keep them over there, develop them nicely. And then, it might be one way, we start doing what we do with the Chelsea sort of thing. You can loan him out to different clubs around Europe. And then when he's to the age where he can impact our first team, then obviously you kick it. I think that's obviously what they're going to do with, Munoz as well. He had a fantastic turn war in the summer as well. He scored quite a few goals for the Mexico team. I think the only one that hasn't really worked out as well as possibly was discussed was Rodrigo Vilca. I got a chance to meet him at the Everton game. He was going through the same turnstiles as I was going into the ground. It was quite weird. I wasn't expecting to be in like the VIP area or somewhere, not just in the Leeds West corner sort of thing. So it was an interesting one. Not bad English, bear in mind he's obviously a young lad from Peru. But I think
did he get your autograph, Richie?
You what? Sorry?
Did he get your autograph?
He did, mate. Yes, he did. Yes. But yeah, no, I think that's the only one where we haven't really seen much from over here. He's had a few unsuccessful loans down in the lower leagues, which as we know ourselves from English players going down, it is even more physical than what the Premier League. It's very demanding. old school sort of football. But it's probably the sort of thing that you need to progress in English football in the Premier League. You need that experience. So I think he's gone back to Peru now. Is that right, Roberto? So he's just to get a bit more first team football in him.
Yeah, that's it. And like I said, I think this happens for a lot of these players where I think and rightly so, people want to expect that when you go to a big team, obviously you have to step it up a notch and perform well. But for some of them, it's not like that. It's not. It doesn't happen to all these players. For every type of Vinicius, you're going to have a different player that are not going to develop as best as you can. And that could be down to a lot of circumstances. Like I said, from a mental perspective, physical, talent-wise, technical, anything. So, yeah, I think it's the case of like having to gain that experience, and that's why getting someone like Angelo, for example, like he's played 70-odd games for a 17-year-old, which is impressive. I think it's fantastic that you're playing that much football in a big league on a big team like Santos. I think it's impressive, but you sometimes need to give it a few more months or years to really see if he's the real deal and that they can indeed break through to a European side.
Interesting. And like Life Goals is put in there. We haven't signed many South Americans and listed a number of South Americans. But what I'll come back with, and I'll always come back Life Goals with it, is you're looking at a span of over 30 years. That isn't a lot of South Americans over a 30-year span. And
where's Mirandinha in that list?
Well,
stop at 30.
But if we're looking at 30 years, he was.
Am I the only one who actually was able to see Mirandinha play live? Is that why I'm getting missed up? Because I'm the eldest team. Yeah. Is that why? Yeah.
Well, probably.
Not
that we're saying ages here or anything. But Marcelino, it wasn't in that list either, and he could quite well have been in there. But what I'll say is, over a 30-year period, where you see lots of other teams sign lots of South American players, we haven't signed as many as a lot of other clubs, certainly in the Premier League. But look, last couple of questions from me. We'll end on a Miggy question, but this is a separate question. We might be quite quick, actually. Who in the MLS that you followed that you think is ready potentially to come to the Premier League and star in the Premier League?
Ooh, it's always a tough question because I think there's so many players out there, and I think it's good to see that MLS has changed the perspective. Like I said, back then, and it's kind of going through a full circle, when Miggy went from Atlanta United to England, you didn't see those type of transfers. Now, because you're seeing a lot of young American players going to Europe, you're seeing this kind of renaissance, you would say, of how MLS is trying to deal with the young players. You see them getting the experience young and then going into Europe at a young age. It's starting to definitely change the mood. I think obviously a few players that come to mind is someone like Castellanos at NYCFC, who's been very much an important player, the reigning MLS Cup champions. Jesus Ferreira, a young striker, an American striker playing at FC Dallas, getting a lot of goals for them. I think he's top goal scorer, if I'm not mistaken, at the moment, or up there. He's like 2021, has obviously experience playing on the national team as well, and in a position that is obviously very competitive. So, yeah, I mean, it's always difficult to say who can indeed be a star. I think obviously the question is even for our best American player in Pulisic, like he's considered our star, but there's still that kind of doubt of like, are we seeing the really best of him? But I think hopefully that heading into the next few years, that there is going to be where Miggy kind of opened the door for all of the MLS players to go into Europe and try it out there. I think we can look back to him and saying that he was the one that kind of helped. I think there were others, of course, back then and in many years before that. But I think hopefully now that we can start definitely seeing a shift in where all these top teams are really looking to MLS as like finding those hidden gems and for them to hopefully succeed for their teams.
Brilliant. And look, I said we'll finish on a Miggy question. And I think a number of people in the chat tonight have talked about Miggy in such a positive way. There's been such a change. I think Daz and Rich talked about it earlier on in the showing, the fact that actually, it came a point in the season, this season, where we thought actually Miggy was definitely going to leave, and in actual fact, he could potentially be one of the first out the door. Now, what came about that is his agent, and Dom Sker, a friend of the channel, talked about his agent saying that he's at the best club in the world, he's happy with how things are progressing, and sees the possibility of change, and that there was talk that, you know, it could be that he stays, and then he's backed that up with a positive pre-season where he scored a couple of goals and he's looked sharp since he's come back. And these are some quotes from NUFC 360, again, friend of the channel, that talked from Eddie Howe's perspective. He's showing that his athleticism in his in the first and composure in the second, talking about his first and second goal against Gateshead. So he's delighted with Miggy and looking at potentially, even though he's been back only a few days, that he could really kind of kick on this season. So the question really from my perspective to you, Roberto, is that, you know, do you see Miggy's future at Newcastle? And if you do, how do you see him faring going into next season? Do you see him really under Eddie Howe hitting the ground running, or could it be sort of more of a bit part season again, as it was for most of this season?
Yeah, I think obviously him scoring, and like I said, you know, like one of you guys said, it is Gateshead. It's not exactly the biggest. Hey, I respect it though. It is very much something that, hey, you got to score the goals and you got to definitely stand out when you need to. So, and the same can be said for someone like Joelinton as well, who everyone thought he'd be written off and has kind of had a big renaissance last season. So, I think I feel more optimistic now than I have in past seasons. I think the last, even when Rafa Benitez, I'll say that I feel as optimistic as I did when he first joined, because I think you're getting a manager that the players like, that obviously is very much respectable in that way, and you could still see some of the improvements. And I was very happy to see that in the way that they've been playing during that course of the season that Eddie Howe was in charge. Now you get a full preseason. Now you get the money that you have and perhaps could spend it wisely in however many weeks that they have left to get something. Now you can formulate a good plan. And I think, everyone is optimistic for this Newcastle side, as anyone should. I think I saw some bets saying that this is a team that could indeed go for a European competition. So, and rightly so. I can understand why. So I think from Miggy's perspective, I think he would definitely have to, because he's been a player that's been there for so long, I think obviously for him to hit the ground running is more expected. So I think it would have to take a very good start from him, a good start to the season where, if I have to be optimistic, maybe he gets a couple assists, maybe a goal or there or something, like for him to stand out and to say, okay, maybe this is someone that can be someone to keep. Because like I said, everything is shifted now, because the expectation is given with all this money. The fact that they can now afford to get players that could indeed be better than him. And that allows someone like Miggy to be competitive and say, hey, wait a minute, I want to be a main star or main big player on this team. And you kind of did see that. You mentioned the fact that he was scoring those goals for Paraguay, and you know, you kind of see a different mentality where he's saying, okay,
freedom. Now
is the time for him to really step it up a notch, and now I could be free and play in the position that works best. Because I think I trust Eddie Howe. I think he definitely is a respectable manager and is very much someone that could be proactive. So I think for now, I think his future at Newcastle is very much here to stay, which I again, like many of us thought it would be the case, that it wouldn't be that case like almost 6 months ago. But I think he will have a big part to play this season, especially if he's able to connect with the likes of Joelinton, St. Maximin, Guimaraes, whoever comes in. And I feel optimistic, honestly, for him now this season.
Yeah, and I think your thoughts just there, Roberto, are the thoughts of a lot of Newcastle United fans that thought he was out the door. He certainly isn't in this position, and it looks like from Eddie Howe's comments that actually he does have a future at Newcastle, and it depends in what capacity. But it would be really, really interesting to see how he performs. It was nice to see him score a couple of goals, well taken goals, by the way, in attacking positions, and hopefully that can be the real catalyst for him to progress in his career for club and country moving forward. But look, before we wrap up the show, 309 watching at this moment in time. We've got over 300 watching, but I think we've got over about 120 those thumbs up on the channel. If you haven't clicked that thumb up, just click it really, really quickly. It means that we can spread the channel further and wider, and more people can access this show, which has been a fantastic show, and it's been amazing to have Roberto come and join us to talk all things South American football, and Miggy. So if you haven't clicked that thumbs up, click it now. Only takes a second, and whilst you're there, click the button that says subscribe. We've had loads of new chatters in the chat tonight that we don't regularly see. So if you haven't subscribed, subscribe to the channel. We are growing every day, bit by bit, and it's been another really, really good show. But just to kind of start to wrap up the show, Roberto, a massive, massive thank you to you for taking the time.
Thanks, Roberto,
for coming and joining us. Fantastic knowledge of South American football, MLS football, and obviously Miguel Almirón in particular. It was really, really great to have that chat with you. And hopefully, down the line we can meet up again, and you can come back on and talk some more. And hopefully we're talking about Miguel Almirón with lots of goals and assists to his name early on in the season, next season, and we're talking about things in him making a flying start to the season for Newcastle.
Send it on to Miggy.
Send it on to Miggy. Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me, guys. It's a pleasure. Like I said, I haven't done a lot of these shows in quite some time, and I usually do it to speak about Miggy. But the fact that I'm able to really open up my knowledge and speak about other things, I think is very refreshing. And obviously, I have the connection to Newcastle. I've been there only once, but I have so many great people that I know there. I've enjoyed myself there, and hopefully this season I can come back for a game. And it would be really nice to enjoy a nice weekend in Newcastle, where I definitely had a great time there.
Cool, definitely. But look, we're not quite done. Obviously, we've answered all the questions, but we've got a little bit of a treat for the Loaded family, because we've got a little bit of an extra coming up. So, like, Daz, Richie, I'll let you guys take the lead on this before we close out the show.
Yeah, so before we get to the sponsors, Richie, I'll hand over to you for a members prize draw that we're going to have this time.
It's actually a belated one, actually, because I think everyone will remember about 4 or 5 weeks ago, we gave away the signed Jamal Lascelles training jersey. But for some reason, I don't know whether it was due to Martin or Paul Oxley, perhaps, comment in the chat might have put the member from coming forward and collecting it, but they didn't collect it, so we've got to give that away. So what we've done is we've actually pre-recorded the draw already, but it is there. Daz, do you want to set it off in a way to let them know who the winner is?
Okay, here it is. Congratulations, Roy.
Yeah, congratulations, Roy. So I don't know if you've been in chat tonight. So what we'll do is obviously, if you want to watch it on catch up, then reach out, give either myself, Daz, Pete, or the Loader channel a DM, and we'll get that all sorted out for you. So congratulations, Roy. Big fan of the channel. He often donates with super stickers or comments and stuff like that. It's always appreciated. So it's nice to see it's actually go to someone who really, really supports the channel. So much appreciated, Roy. Go on then, Daz, over to you for the sponsors, mate.
Yeah, Roy's actually deleted his Twitter, just so he doesn't get it. We don't track him down. Okay,
it might be worth something if he goes to Chelsea, like those rumours were saying last week. You never know. You never know.
Or he could come good for us as well. Okay. The other day we gave a shout out to Mick, who had his Loaded mug. We also want to give a shout out to Ray, who also is rocking the Loaded Mag NUFC mug. Just a shout out then to our sponsors, and I'll be really quick. First of all, so I'm on the Shyburns topic. Let's go with Shyburns.com. And Simon's in the chat there tonight as well. And everyone knows the range that Simon has. Go check out the website for the latest. And as I mentioned, the mugs, there's water bottles, and there's also the Loaded t-shirt in a variety of different colors. So pick a color that you like. So check that out. And of course, 50% of the profits go to the NUFC Foundation as well. So check that out. Then also shout out to Pins and Prints and the fabulous pins and prints that Dean has available. You all know them by this stage. Also shout out to Retro NUFC and the constantly changing catalog that Retro NUFC has, so you have to go to his website to check out the latest. And I know he dropped another set of bucket hats that I'm always raving about, but I've never actually got one yet, but maybe someday. So check out Retro NUFC. And then also our newest sponsor, Machine House. So Martin is in the chat. He was in the chat earlier. So shout out to Machine House and the range that the lads have there, and in men's and women's, and lovely t-shirts, hoodies, some back in stock now again, more dropping in August, I think. So go check that out. So yeah, and actually there was another comment in the chat, and I said I'm going to bring it up here as well, because Sean asked about how he goes about being a sponsor. Contact us on Twitter, any of us, or go to the Loaded Mag, and we'll sort you out and take it from there. But yeah, we're becoming popular with the sponsors all of a sudden. But yeah, that's it really from that end of it. Pete, back to you.
Yeah, Roberto, just before you go, where can all the Loaded and Newcastle United fans find you on social media, and a little bit about your work?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, thank you guys for having me. You could just follow me on Twitter at Roberto Rojas 97, all one word. Typically always talking about basically Paraguayan football or anything really. I've kind of figured out, like, I always like to answer these questions in the way of like saying I just tweet whatever I want, but like whatever I do. But yeah, you can follow me. Obviously, I do 2 podcasts as well. I do Low Limit Football, which is a show that obviously I talk every week with my co-host Joe Ucello about everything going on in the world of football. We tend to do a show every week talking about that. So make sure to check out Low Limit Football, the football in Spanish. So FUTBOL. And Guarani Vision, like I said, the first ever podcast dedicated to Paraguayan football in English, where we don't really talk a lot of Miggy in comparison to obviously what's going on in the domestic league, the national team. So if you want your take on Paraguayan football and, you know, kind of want to be one of those like followers for those kind of niche type of podcasts, check out Guarani Vision on Twitter and YouTube as well.
Perfect.
Cheers, Roberto.
And yeah, so that's it. That's the end of the show. Thanks for everyone tuning in. Really, really good insight. And like I say, we'll be back with more in the coming week. There will be another fully loaded transfer show where all the regulars will be back talking all things transfers over the course of the week. I'm sure we'll be getting a show coming up very soon with Paul from Toon Review, who was in the chat tonight. Welcome, Paul. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the Toon Review. And once this show is off air, make sure you switch over to Toon Review. That is just kicking off their show very, very shortly tonight, as well, as we are working in collaboration with Paul from Toon Review. So fantastic stuff tonight. And look, we will leave it there. So have a great Sunday evening. Enjoy whatever you're doing. Certainly turn over to Paul from Toon Review, and we will speak to you very, very soon. You guys take care. Have a fantastic evening.
Right, everyone.
Good luck.
Thanks for joining us, Roberto.